Alrighty then, and welcome back to Kickstart. In this video, we're going to be tackling the AutoCAD fundamentals from drawing in 2D and 3D, as well as going through the controls on how to adjust our view within our model space. As usual, I am Ludwik from Microvellum, and would you like to kickstart with me? I'd like to kickstart with you. Let's kickstart together. Alrighty then, and here we are back in Toolbox, and we have a room and we have a drawing open. Now we just need to actually have something on that drawing, and we're going to be focusing primarily in this area here, as well as our ribbons up the top, as most of our AutoCAD commands and functions are done through these ribbons. Now, as you can see, we are currently in the Home tab in my ribbon up the top here, and a majority of my drafting tools is going to be done through here. I've got my modeling section, which contains a lot of my 3D AutoCAD drafting tools, my solid editing, which lets me edit those 3D objects, as well as a draw and modify that lets me draw and modify 2D objects respectively. Now I'm going to start off with drawing some 2D objects, and I'm going to start off with this guy smack dab in the middle. This guy is simply line. Going to click on him, and you can see down my command line, he's telling him, yep, you've selected him, and now you need to progress by clicking on a point on your screen to draw your line. So I'm going to click over here with a left click, and I'm going to move my mouse in a direction that I would like to draw my line. Now you can see that I can move my line in a 360 direction, but at certain points, mainly 90 degrees, a green line appears. Now this green line is designed to make it easy for me to snap onto my 90-degree angles. And here's turned on by this little button down below here. Alternatively, you can click next to him to select ortho mode. Clicking on this has it automatically come in, no matter where you move your mouse, to be 90 degrees. Consistently a straight line. I'm personally going to have this back at polar tracking, so it's back to my 360. The reason being is that I can also change the angle that I'd like to draw my line. We'll get to them in a sec. First, let's do a straight line in this direction. Now I can either click over here to do my line. Alternatively, I can just type in the distance of the line I would like to have in this direction. In this case, I would like it to be 500 mil. And there in white is that first line. I can then do a return of that in this direction here, make it 500, and enter. Now from here, I can keep going, and in fact, I can actually specify angles as well. You can see on my cursor, I've got a distance, and to the top right of my cursor, a little angle bar. So I'm going to say I want to go 500 mil in this direction, roughly, but I would like my angle to change. Now I'll just hit tab, and now it's asking me, well, what angle do you want it to be? And I can type in 45. And you can see, that's now going to go 500 mil in a 45-degree angle. I can now hit enter because I'm done. Now you can see that my line is drawn up. Now there's another different kind of line that you can use, and this is called a polyline. Now a polyline is back in my draw tab over here, and is the top left option here. Now my polyline, or as my command line likes to call it, line, is pretty much controlled the same way as my lines. As in, first thing I need to do is specify a point. So I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to do something very similar. Again, the controls are very similar to my line. I can move the mouse in the direction I would like my line to be, and I can type in that distance. I can hit enter after I type it in, and I can move my mouse in any other direction as well. And also similar, you can also type in what you would like your angle to be when you hit tab. So if I wanted to say be in this direction here, I can go type in 500 and hit tab, and then I can specify the angle I would like it to be, say 330 degrees. Something like that. Now, the polyline is a little bit different from your line because you can also add new things to your lines. For example, you can change it to an arc. I just go to my command line, click on arc, and now you can see it's changing my line from something that's straight to something that's curved. I can left click, and if I want to end my polyline, I can hit enter once more. Now there's another difference between my polyline and my line, And that's if I click on my line over here, you can see that they're actually broken up into 3 separate entities, broken up to the different points that I specified on the screen. While my polyline, if I click on any part of it, it's all one entity. So from here, you can also see that when I click on my objects, blue boxes and rectangles appear. And these guys are called vertices, and they can be used to move or shift or stretch objects. For example, with my polyline over here, if I click on this vertex over here, I can stretch my polyline. If I click on this square vertex over here, I am moving. So my polyline, the rectangle is for stretching, the square is for moving. Now I'm just going to hit escape over here, so I've got nothing highlighted. You can also draw 2D shapes. You don't have to just stick with drawing lines, you can draw proper shapes on your screen as well. They are back in our draw section, and you can draw things from polygons to ellipses, rectangles, and such. I'm going to start with a rectangle over here. Click on this guy, click on a point, and if I move my mouse, I can specify the other corner. Now you can either eyeball this, or you can see that on my cursor, the bottom text box actually has a blue highlight over it, and it's in here that I can actually type in the width of my rectangle. So I'm going to put in here 1000. Now if I want to specify the depth now, I can hit tab, and now I can specify that depth. I'm going to make him a nice even 400. And there's that rectangle over there. Circle is over here. And you can see there's a little arrow next to it over here. They can specify how you would like to draw up your circle as well. I'm going to stick with just doing a center and a radius. And I'm going to specify a point right over here. And I can obviously type in that radius. So I want it to be 100. That's now a 200 diameter circle or 100 radius. Now, all these objects over here can obviously be deleted or moved around using the move button over here or the erase. So if I want to erase, say, this warrant line over here, I can click on this erase button, click on the object, and enter. Alternatively, you can also use delete on your keyboard instead. Now move, if I click on this move button over here, I can click on an object, hit enter, and I can specify a base point. Now a base point is pretty much where you're going to specify at what point you're going to be moving your object from. So if I want to move from the center of my circle here, I can see I'm snapping onto the center, and now I'm moving from that center point. Now the next point I click is where that center point is moving to. And I've now moved it into that point there. You can also do the same thing with corners. If I go to move, click on this rectangle over here, hit enter, I can specify my base point as being this corner here and move it to this corner over here if need be. You can also move it a set distance. I mean, if I need to move him down 100 mil, I can click on my move, click on my object, enter, and I can specify any real base point if I want, if I'm going to move him a set distance. So I can click on this point here, move him down in the direction I would like to move him. Clear as day, you can move him as far as you want, because as soon as you get him in the direction you want, and you type in how far you want, it's going to move in that direction, how you would like him to. Now there's a fair few 2D AutoCAD commands and shapes that we can use, but we're going to change subject slightly and go to my 3D objects. Now my 3D objects are going to be over here. And one of the most common ones you're going to be using are under this option over here. You can use this to select any 3D object available to you, at least any sort of shape. So if I use a box, for example, I can click on this point over here. And same way that I drew a rectangle, I can specify the width and the length. I'm going to make this one 300 in width, hit tab on my keyboard, and make it 500 in depth. If I hit enter, there's going to be one more box that's going to appear. And that's saying, well, how thick is my box going to be? I've got my width and my depth, but not the height. It is a 3D object. In fact, if I went over to my view cube over here, and I click on this corner of my cube, you can see what it's trying to do next. And from here, you can type in how thick you would like this rectangle to be. And I'm going to make him a nice, happy 100 mil. Just a 100 mil box over here. Now you notice that I changed the view of my drawing space. I was looking at a top view, now I'm looking at a southwest view. And that's because you can use the view cube that appears on the right hand side to change the views of your model space. In fact, if I would like him to go back to a top view, I can go and click on the top face of my cube. If I would like to shift it to look at a front view, there's a little arrow that appears over here. Click on it, and now it's looking at the front view. Now you can also rotate the view using these arrows over here as well. There's also a few shortcut keys you can use. You can type in things like SW and enter to switch around to a southwest view, or SE and enter for a southeast. Now you can also switch it back to a front view or to a top view as well. If I want to go back to a top view, the shortcut I can use is UPL. Or if I wanted to go from a front view, I can go UN for north. UN is north, you can use US for south, UE for east, UW, you get the idea. While UPL is, well, plan view for that matter. So I'll switch it back to UPL, back to the top view of my screen. Now you can also change 2D objects into 3D objects as well. So I would like this 2D rectangle that I had before as a 3D object. So I'm going to go to a southwest view, and instead I'm going to use the Extrude tool. So I'm going to click on this tool, click on my 2D object, hit enter, and now you can see it's trying to extrude that 2D object. So I'm going to tell him to be a 555 tall box. And now that 2D rectangle that I drew is a 3D cube. Well, not really a cube because it's not even space, but you get the idea. Now we can use some solid editing tools to adjust our 3D object to any sort of shape that we would like, or have any features added or taken away from it. So say, for example, I would like a big circle inside of this cube here. At the moment, it's looking pretty slick. In fact, you can actually change this from a wireframe view to a bit more of a 3D solid view. To do that, on the top left-hand side of your screen, you can click on 2D wireframe, and you've got different visual styles that you can use. The one I'm going to be using is conceptual. Now you can see my 3D objects as a 3D solid form. Now I would like to put a hole pretty much in the middle here, or thereabouts in this rectangle over here. So I'm just going to switch it back to a 2D wireframe by clicking on this conceptual, back to 2D wireframe, and I'm going to go to a top view. Let's go my mouse over the cube over here, and I want to rotate them, so I'm just going to go to these arrows here. Now I'm going to start off by drawing a, well, I need to start off by drawing in a 3D solid object, but I'm going to be a bit fun or funny, however you want to think of me, and I'm going to draw an odd shaped 3D object, because I can use anything from here if I want to, but I'm going to do something a little bit wacky. So I'm going to first draw my 3D shape. So I'm going to use a polyline, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to specify some odd points. Just left clicking, just eyeballing it. Now I'm going to close this shape, and the easiest way to do that is in your command line, you can see the option to close the polyline. Hit that, and now it comes back to one shape. I'm going to go back to a 3D view. The hotkey I'm going to use is SW and enter, and there's that 2D object down below. Next, what I need to do is I need to extrude that object. So I'm going to click on that 2D object inside, hit enter, and I'm going to extrude him all the way through. Like so. Now if I switch this back to my conceptual view, I can see my 3D object inside of this guy. Now I need to make that hole in my cube, and in order to make that hole, I need two 3D solids. One of the solid that I would like to keep, and one that I would like to pretty much make a hole or cut out from. Now that I've got my rectangle that I'm going to keep in my 3D solid that I essentially want to use to cut this out, almost like Play-Doh, I'm going to use a command called subtract. And that subtract command is under your solid editing tools and right over here, the one with the two cubes sort of trying to get away from each other. If I click on this guy here, the first object your Microvellum command is going to ask is, well, what object are we going to be keeping? So I want to keep this guy here. So I'm going to click on this rectangle, hit enter. Next it's going to ask you, well, we need to select another object, and this object is what we're going to be subtracting. So I'm going to click on this solid over here, enter, and you can see now that I have subtracted that 3D solid from my main one, and there's a big gaping hole inside my rectangle. Now there's another way that you can sort of pan around and move around in your 3D space, and that's by using the wheel of your mouse. Which wheel? Well, most of you should have something along the lines of this guy over here. This is the wheel of your mouse, or as I like to call him, Mr. Wheelie. Now Mr. Wheelie has a special feature. If you click on him, or if you press him down, and you can see a little hand pop up. Hold that wheel down and move your mouse, and you can start panning around in that view. Now what we can also do is if you hold shift and hold down on Mr. Wheelie, we can orbit around in a 3D view. You can see my view cube on the top left adjusting based on the view that I am now looking at my 3D solid. Now the next area we're going to be focusing on is adding in some dimensions, because I've got some shapes in here, but I'd like to sort of annotate them and sort of show what sizes those objects are. So I'm going to start off by going to a top view, and I'm going to switch it back to 2D wireframe, like so. So shift them around this way, excelente. Now my dimension tools, well, for that matter, any sort of annotative tools, is going to be under the annotate tab right up the top here. All your annotating goodness is here, from adding in lines of text, dimensions, multi-leaders, and more is done through this little interface over here. Now I'm going to be going straight to dimension over here, and I'm going to say I want to dimension this guy here. So I'm going to click on a point that I'm going to start my dimension from, click on the second point, and you can see it now measures that point there. I can also change what kind of dimension I am doing. So if I click down on this arrow here, I can change what kind of dimension I'm going to be using. Say for example, I want to use the radius dimension, and I want to measure the radius of the circle. You can now see that radius come up. Just left click to specify what you'd like that dimension to be. You can also measure whether in a 90-degree angle or on any sort of angle as well. If I go back to this little arrow over here, I can use aligned, and I can measure from here to here, and it gives me that exact measurement as well. Now when I'm doing my dimensions, there is a little parameter that it's very useful to have turned on, and that is my snaps. And my snaps are pretty much those green symbols that you would have seen pop up every now and again. Forgot what they look like? Well, if I use any sort of AutoCAD command that requires me to specify points on the screen, those snaps will appear. A good example is if I go to my dimension tool over here, and I would like to measure from this point here. You see that green square? That's one of those snaps. That snap is pretty much telling me that this is the end of this line. And even if my mouse isn't completely on it, as long as I can see that snap symbol, you can see my mouse is slightly off, it's going to start from that point there. I can move to another point. Even though my mouse isn't exactly on that point, it's going to pick up that snap point there. Now there are other snap points that you can use. The one that you just saw was the end point, which came in as a square. I can also specify the middle of a point. So if I want to put a line, say the middle of this line here, I'm going to go back to my home, go back to my line, and the snap you want to look for is that of a triangle. So you can see that's going to be the middle point of this line here, and it's going to snap onto that. Now, you want to know what snaps you have turned on or available, you can go down to the cube and click on the arrow next to him. And these tell me what snaps I have turned on or off. And you can also turn them on and off as you would like to as well. If you would like to find quadrants of a circle, for example, or you want to use the nearest snap So pretty much anything that your cursor is towards will bring up a snap point. Now at the moment, all these guys are coming in as a white color, and we can change that. We can change what kind of layer or what kind of color that these objects are going to be using. So for example, I would like to change this guy to a different color or a different layer. My layers are going to be back in my home tab, and here are my layer options. This little drop down list will tell me what layers I have available with different colors attached to them. So I want to specify, yep, this guy over here is going to be a green color, or it's going to be something that symbolizes, say, a 2D kicker. If I click on that line there, I can go to my layers and select that 3D kick. And now you can see it's changed to that layer and now a green color attached to him. If I want to change it back, I can click on him and I give it back to what he originally was, which by default should be this little 0 over here. So these are just some of the fundamental AutoCAD commands that you may come across as you're using Microvellum Toolbox. Now there's many more that you can explore and have a play around with, but these guys are going to be enough to get you off the ground and get kick-started with your Microvellum application. As usual, thank you for watching, and as usual, I'm Ludwik from Microvellum, and as usual, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day.